In this week's episode of The Truth About Business, you'll discover the following 3 business and entrepreneurial insights. Number 1, why it's not always about building the biggest, it's about building a business that suits you. Number 2, why swallowing your pride and having the courage to ask for help will speed up your success. And number 3, why reading books and learning is crucial, but sometimes you've just got to do it your way. So stay tuned for all of that and so much more on this week's episode of The Truth About Business. I'm Benjamin Brain, and by day I'm a director of a multi-award-winning family-run business. And by night I interview successful business owners to share their journeys, experiences and truths to serve as inspiration, motivation and first-hand education for like-minded entrepreneurs and wantrepreneurs to fast-track our own business success. This is the truth about business, told by those who have been there, done that and have the scars to prove it. From the good times to the bad, the marketing strategies and sales tactics to the productivity hacks and success habits. I'm here to give you the de-sugar-coated version of what it's really like and what really works. If you're thinking of starting a business or are already in business, I created this for you. So let's get started. So today I talk business with Rachel Hayward. After falling into the world of charity work, Rachel discovered that she had a real passion for helping others that opened her eyes to a totally new perspective. With her sights set on becoming managing director by the time she was 35, Rachel managed to turn that dream into reality. But when the economy took a nosedive and purse strings tightened, she decided to take her destiny into her own hands and left. After making a promise to herself and setting a deadline to launching her own business, Rachel stayed true to her pledge and when the time came, took a leap of faith to become a full-time entrepreneur. This eventually led to the birth of Ask the Chameleon, where Rachel delivers high-quality bid writing and consultancy services that get results at a cost-effective price. 5 years later, and Rachel is still going strong, having secured over £12 million in grant funding and contracts for her clients. As well as Rachel being nominated for 2 outstanding women's awards, Ask the Chameleon itself was a big winner in the Small Business 100 Awards for 2018 and was also the Federation of Small Business Micro Business of the Year 2019 for the East Midlands. To find out more about Rachel and the services she provides, visit www.askthechameleon.co.uk or you can find Rachel on LinkedIn under Rachel Hayward. Rachel is R-A-C-H-E-L, Hayward, H-A-Y-W-A-R-D. This was another brilliant, candid interview with an inspirational entrepreneur who has a true passion for helping others and also gives an awful lot back to the community with the work that she does outside of the business. You know, success leaves footprints, so let's take a walk with an award-winning, contract-securing powerhouse and owner of Ask the Chameleon, Rachel Hayward. Okay, so Rachel, thank you for joining us on the podcast today and taking some time out to share your business truths with us. So we'll get straight into it. Can you tell us what your speciality is?
My speciality is that I write compelling content for procurement and bid opportunities and also for business award applications. So they're 2 alternative sales methods and techniques that perhaps other businesses haven't thought of or could be established routes for others, and they need some help within their offices to be able to get that content in on time.
And what do you tend to see are some of the benefits that businesses experience of having those things, the awards applications, the tenders done properly by somebody that knows what they're doing?
So if we take the awards, most common myth about business awards is that you're nominated by somebody else and it happens in secret. A lot of businesses apply for themselves. So they write the content, they submit it, they collate all the testimonials. The benefit of having somebody else do it for you, and I speak from personal experience, is that it's very hard to write about yourself and to really promote and push yourself out there. I think it's a very British thing. So with a lot of my clients, we just have a coffee and they talk to me about their business and then I go off and I write the content. And then it comes back to them and they're always really surprised at what I write about them. And the same with the tenders as well. I mean, the tenders tend to be very labour-intensive, time-consuming beasts because over time the procurement processes have changed, so there's nobody to ring and ask for a bit of help or guidance or clarification. So they rely on people such as myself that's had experience of delivering that in the past. What is that question after? What are they looking for? What does this mean? So we tend to demystify all the vocabulary and the terminology.
And particularly when it comes to the awards, what is it that you see sometimes businesses doing wrong? Is there a common mistake that they're making with these awards applications?
There can be lots of mistakes. They don't answer the question. They don't follow instructions and they don't meet the criteria. And I think sometimes it can be that they just haven't spent time. And that's really disappointing because we're human beings and we remember things when they don't go so well. So it can paint a very poor picture of somebody that you believe is a really successful business or entrepreneur. So I think it is taking that time to treat it as if you were pitching right in front of somebody for a really important piece of work. And that's the best way to think about an award, really.
And can you think of a business or an entrepreneur in particular where they've taken advantage of your service and they've reaped some big rewards from it? Is there anybody that stands out in mind, any businesses?
There's a couple. I love writing for all the different businesses that I get to meet, so I'm very lucky. But one of my very first clients was a charity, actually, because that's my background in charities, and they won the Queen's Award for Voluntary Service, and that's like the MBE for charities. And that was such a proud moment. And actually, we built on from that, and they won additional charity awards that some of them came with a bit of financial money to help, like unrestricted reserves, which means that charities can use that for whatever they want, training programs that went alongside it. And I think that has contributed to the very positive position that they're in right now in terms of funders. They've also won tenders and procurement. So I think it put them in a very sound place for other awards. And then their founder has just recently been given an MBE.
Wow. Okay, so it's not necessarily just thinking about the award that you're going to win, but it's also all the doors that potentially it could unlock afterwards as well.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. Success breeds success. And I do think, awards is just another PR sales funnel. Some businesses don't take advantage of, and charities can be the same.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think they don't take advantage?
And I do think it's because they think that they're going to be nominated by a secret admirer somewhere. They've not thought about it. You don't know what you don't know. So if no one's ever talked to you about those sorts of things, and I certainly, my writing of awards happened by accident because one of my clients said, "Oh, there's this award. Could you write this for me as well?" I was writing tenders for them at the time. So it hadn't come into my sphere either. So, I think it's just a bit of a dark art and a bit of a secret sometimes.
Okay, so if you could leave our listeners with one tip, one piece of advice that's going to help them submit an awards application that's going to get them closer to winning, what would it be?
Well, it'd have to be two pieces of advice because it just does. One is plenty of time, and the other one is to answer the question.
What do you mean by plenty of time?
If an award is due, the deadline is due tomorrow, and you've only found out about it today, realistically, it's not going to happen. It's like applying for a job, because I'm HR by trade, so that's how I treat a lot of the work that I do. And you want to put yourself in the best light. You're not going to have the time to do that. And with a lot of awards, you need historical data, performance, testimonials, case studies, examples. And I encourage my clients to say no more often than not, more often than they say yes, because we don't have the time to put something excellent together. And if we don't have the time, then we don't do it. And what I say to them to soften the blow is we draw down the information and use that to gather everything that we need to apply next year.
Thank you for sharing that. So we know a little bit more about your speciality and what we can do to give ourselves a better chance of winning an awards. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about how you got into this business in the first place, and could you give us a bit of a summary of your career from the first job leading up to where you are today?
So my first job was for East Staffsborough Council because I'm a Burton girl. I actually spent a year there on placement from university and was lucky that they were looking for somebody to work in the personnel department part-time. And so I got a job with them whilst I finished my degree. I did a 1.5 year degree top-up from my HND. And in the 6 months So you have a year taught, and then in 6 months you would write your thesis to get your honours and your classification. So I worked in the personnel department in the morning and I wrote my thesis at night.
What were you studying at uni?
So it was a business studies degree. I hadn't worked out what I wanted to be. I don't think I still have worked out what I want to be. But I liked working in the personnel department, and because I'd spent my placement there, I knew the systems and I could hit the ground running, and I think that's why they took me on. That became full-time, and then I was really lucky. They sent me back to university, and this time I went to the University of Derby to do my HR qualifications. Passed those, and then I moved into the engineers department and worked in the engineers department on finance, which isn't my particular bag. But in a council at that time, which was a number of years ago, succession planning was really hard, and I knew I had to leave to be able to get broader experience. And my partner at the time had been TUPE transferred. I met him whilst I worked at the council, and he went to work for a civil engineering company in Birmingham. And I followed him shortly after and went to work for a charity for disabled people. And I loved it. It was the first job that I'd had that I just totally fell in love with and would work all hours God sends.
How did that come about? Was it just by chance, or were you actively out there looking for that type of work at the time?
I'd never considered working for a charity. They wanted an admin and personnel officer. It was in Birmingham. Actually, it was the other side of Birmingham, so it was a nightmare to get to in the car. And I knew I didn't want to just do HR personnel on its own. I knew I needed something a bit broader, and this seemed to be fine. And I was their first HR person. Oh my God, it was such a baptism of fire, but I loved it. We had a board of disabled people, and we were something it's called user-led, and it was so inspiring. And our building was built bespoke for them. And it had a 2-storey house with all different aids and adaptations. And I had my eyes completely opened to what it was like for disabled people and how society disabled them. And it was just totally transformational. The work was hard, and the charity really grew. And it was a very exciting time to be with them. But after a while, I started to want something else, and James and I both moved back to Burton. He got another job with another engineering company, and I came back to Derby and got a job with our local council for voluntary service, which is now called Community Action Derby. And I was their development team and HR manager, which meant giving advice and guidance to groups on HR, which is like firefighting all the time. So that was huge. And then I stayed with them for nearly 10 years. I became the development director, and then we set up a trading arm, because charities can raise a certain amount of income through generation, but we wanted to do something else. And I'd been delivering unemployment programs for young people and older people out of work, and we had a great model. They would be placed within charities, and charities are really good at working with the whole person. And this was before the coalition government came in, and there was a lot of money, and we did very well. And we set up a trading arm, and by the time I was 30, I'd done really well. And my ambition was, by the time I was 35, to be an MD of the charity, and I was, of the trading arm. But then the government sort of put pay to that. So I took voluntary severance. And that was difficult because I really genuinely believed I'd stay there forever. I had a fantastic team, what they wouldn't do for people out of work to help them. We looked at, we considered the whole person, not just numbers and stuff. But it was very difficult fundraising-wise. And that's where the bid writing all started. I was writing £1 million tenders and things like that.
To generate money for the charity to be able to operate, right?
Yeah. So it was in Birmingham when I first started to write funding applications for them, because I could write the policies and procedures for the HR, and I liked writing, and I like imagining what the services could be. So that carried on when I moved to Derby, and we got really good at it. And when it's just you, I knew where everything was. I could write a tender very quickly. There's a constant thing when you work in charities. You're always fundraising. You're always looking at how you're going to bring the money in. You're always writing applications. So, you get to be a great master of all trades, really.
Where are the general go-tos for a charity? So for a charity you mentioned in the first one that you worked at in Birmingham that you really loved and opened your eyes up to the world of this sort of work, you said that you were there at an exciting part of them when they were growing. Where would you submit tenders to actually to get money from? Because that's always something that I've wondered, where do charities get the money from to be able to grow and to do the work that they do?
Well, at that time, we got money from the local authority and the NHS. That's diminished over time considerably. We would also apply for tenders on behalf of Job Centre Plus back then. The lottery was just starting out about then. So they have different programmes. We do some Arts Council, there'll be some Sport England, it's a full range. And it's still like that now. However, because of austerity, the competition is higher. So success rates are lower, not because the funding applications that we put in aren't good. They are very good. It's just that there's a considerably lower amount of money to go around.
And a lot more competition.
Yeah, and funders are having to be really strict in following their criteria. So, over time it got more and more difficult when I was in Derby. And I think when I was 40, I started to realise that I was making my staff redundant and I didn't want to do it anymore. I'd made people redundant, just because funding streams finished every year since I'd worked for the charity. It's a fact of life. It's the way it has to be. But after a while, it starts to get a bit much emotionally, I think. And then when it started to happen to me, it was like, right, okay, you need to take control. So I left. And I thought, right, I'm going to take some time out and reinvent myself because I've never known what I wanted to do. And I was doing a bit of lecturing at the University of Derby.
What were you lecturing on at the time?
So I was lecturing as they had an employability module in the business school for first and second year business students. And I'd gone in to help talk about entrepreneurialism within third sector organisations to the master's students and met one of my lecturers from when I did my CIPD. So she was still there. And she said, did I want to do a bit of teaching? Yeah, that'd be great. I'd really like to do that. So I became an associate lecturer, which is a bit like being a supply lecturer, really. And I started to do a little bit of teaching on the side, which I really enjoyed. And I think the students enjoyed the fact that I was still working. So, I hadn't been an academic all my life. So that started. And then when I took the voluntary severance, I thought, do I stay lecturing at the university? What else can I do? And a friend of mine through work was working at Derby College and she asked me to write a bid for them. And I'd never thought about writing for anybody else. And it won. And that was it. That was how the business started, completely by accident. Because as soon as we won that one, and I'm very competitive, it was like, should we put in some more? And then somebody else asked me. So it grew from there, really. But at one point I had 3 jobs. So I was working at the university. I was also working for Derby College on the National Citizenship Service, connecting my third sector charity contacts with the young people that need to do social action, and working for myself on the side.
And so that was the birth of Ask the Chameleon.
Yes, but it wasn't called that then. Because this all happened by accident and took me a bit by surprise, I sort of traded as myself, Rachel Hayward Consulting, but I didn't like the name because I didn't think it was going to last. I thought I'd have to get a real job at some point. And then about 18 months in, I realised that no, it was still happening. That I set it up properly. So in 2005, that's when I created Ask the Chameleon.
15 years later, still going strong.
Oh, no, not 2005, 2015.
I was going to say.
I'm adding more years to myself than I need to.
Half a decade later, still going strong. Still a big achievement.
No, we'll be 5 in May.
And so there's a couple of bits that I'd like to dig into there. So you mentioned that when you were at the second charity down here in Derby, you had ambitions to be the MD by the time you were 35 years old. Had you always had that drive? Had you always seen yourself in your younger days when you were at uni as maybe being a business owner or an MD, or was that something that developed over time?
I think I did when I was at university. I didn't know that I wanted to work for myself. So it because my parents are self-employed and so is my sister. But I've only realised recently that perhaps it was always in the stars and meant to be. Whereas because my parents were self-employed, I never wanted to be self-employed because it affected us as a family quite a lot when I was younger. So I think I always thought that I'd steered myself away to it, but I think actually I'd steered myself towards it, if you understand the conflict there. But I wanted to be successful. And I can remember a conversation when I was at university along those lines of, we were talking about what our ambitions were going to be, and 35 seemed so far away back then. And I said, no, I want it to say MD on my business card by the time I'm 35.
And you made it happen.
But the thing with that is you have to be careful then, because what comes after that? And that's what I say to my students now, don't make your goals too tight, because there's a lot of life to live. And I think I've always been fortunate that I've never just done one thing. And even when I've worked for companies for a long time, and if you looked at my CV, and I never moved, it was because it reinvented itself every 12 to 18 months. I'd take something else on, it'd go in a different direction. And I think that's what always kept me interested.
So when you were Rachel Hayward Consultancy, this was offering the same type of service that you're now offering as Ask the Chameleon. You had 3 jobs at the time. Was it a case of, as you started to generate more business through word of mouth, you started to invest less time in those other 2 jobs until eventually it was enough to provide for you as a business itself?
Yes. The college was the first to go. I loved working on the NCS programme. I believe it very passionately in it. But under 18s and I aren't the best of partners. They're not robust enough for me, is the best way to put it.
Do you mean you're too strict? Is that a nice way of saying that?
Yeah. But oh my God, I'd be exhausted at the end of the summer. But, the difference they used to create and the transformation of them was wonderful, but I was just mentally exhausted. So anybody that teaches 18 and below, I have the utmost admiration for them. So the college was first to go, and actually every time I left certain things, it really did, it was a wrench. So then I was at the university, and the university had offered me 3 days a week to concentrate on the employability programmes for 2 years. So I thought, right, that gives me 2 years to really build Ask the Chameleon, so that in 2 years' time I do leave. And again, I really had to remind myself at the end of those 2 years, this is what you said. You said that you would stop because they asked me to stay. And because I'm not a great risk taker, I said I would leave, but I would go back and I would do some associate teaching. But there's no guarantee of work on that side. So that fit really well. But I don't know quite how I used to manage to fit everything in 3 days a week. So it was 3 days a week on the university and probably 6 days a week on Ask the Chameleon, but you find time.
Going from Rachel Hayward Consultant to Ask the Chameleon, how did you come up with the name?
So that came about. So Bev Crichton from the university is a great friend of mine, and she's been really terrific and helpful with the business. And I was with her and we were talking about it. I said, I need it to have a name. I don't want it to be. And I think what it was, if I am totally honest, I wanted something to hide behind. And we were just talking and she said, well, what are you going to offer? And it was like, well, it could be anything depending on what people want. It's a bit like being a chameleon. And then that was it. I started to investigate into that as a business name and found that it's very overused. And it does have negative connotations to it as well. And I was really disappointed because I sort of set my heart on it by that stage. And I was talking to my web guy and we were looking at domains that were available. And I said, I really want to have it. And he said, well, if you want to have it, just have it. And then we said, we need something in front of it. And I came up with Ask the, because I would be at the top of an A to Z list.
Oh, okay.
And that was just as simple as it was.
Yeah.
And there's been lots of great things about it because everyone asks, what the chameleon is and how that came about. But then it can be very difficult to spell. And sometimes my accent can make it difficult to be understood over the telephone. So I've had people say, the comedian, are you the comedian? I am very funny, but no. And then when my I went to see a company in Burton to design me my logo, and then it just came to life. Fuse 4 did such a terrific job because I didn't want it to have the animal, I wanted it to be different. I'm obsessed with being different so that things stand out. And just the tail and the colours were just fab.
Yeah, so it's not just a reflection of the work that you do as a business, it's actually a reflection of your own personality.
Yeah. And I am more confident in it now than I perhaps was then. And I'm not so bothered about hiding behind a name now.
Why did you feel the need to do that?
I think because I felt like a business owner by accident, and I wasn't sure what the future was going to be. I wasn't sure how long it was going to go on for, how it would take off. And I think maybe because of the redundancy and everything else, my confidence perhaps wasn't as high as I wanted it to be. So to give the business a persona separate from me perhaps just gave me some control, really.
The time that you'd given yourself the 2 years before you left the uni and you started on this full time, how did you put that into a calendar or a diary? How did you know when the 2 years was up? Was it the end of 2 years of term, I presume was an easy way to pinpoint it?
Well, it was my contract with the university.
Right, oh, right, okay.
So, but, I had to be reminded, you said you'd leave. And it was like, yes, I did, but it was like, no, you said you'd leave.
And was that an internal conversation, or was that with the support of people around you, or was it something that you had to deal with yourself?
Both, because you stay because you like the people more often than not. And I did, the team at the university are fabulous. But it was a very different environment for me, and it still is. It's a huge organisation. I've never worked for such a big company before. And if I hadn't have started the business, I probably would have become a full-time academic if the position had been available. But I was terribly torn. And just as I left, one of the students nominated me for a personal tutor award. So that was the first award anybody's ever nominated me for. And I won, and I was so shocked because I was quite strict with the students, because I wanted them to do, I was so passionate, I wanted them to do so well, that I was really emotional about it. And I thought, oh no, and now I'm leaving. Is it the right thing to do?
Yeah, well, there must have been so many signs with that as well, that you must have started to think, like, is the universe telling me to stay here? How did you know, or did you know at the time, that you were making the right decision?
I'd promised myself, and other people as well, so they helped me to stay accountable. And I also thought, what's the worst that could happen? And I can stay as an associate, so if it doesn't totally work out, I've got a backup. And that's what encouraged me to do it in the end. And I thought, if I don't try now, it's never going to happen. Because I've come to business, self-employed business, later in life. So I just thought, in the end, what's the worst that could happen, and just give it a go. And all the signs were favourable, and still are favourable.
How did you used to market yourself in the early days? By the time you were asked the Chameleon, you'd obviously had a lot of experience. You'd already submitted plenty of tenders and bids and awards from being Rachel Hayward Consultancy. What were the ways that you had to market yourself back then, or did you have to market yourself?
I didn't. It all came through word of mouth. And then obviously once you start to be more active in the network, because I had to teach myself how to network, because in the charity sector we don't do it in the same way. So it's happened through word of mouth and from the contacts that I had before, especially in Derby. And because, if you think about it, I was working 3 days a week for the university, so I didn't need a lot of work at that time, because actually I couldn't cope with a lot of work. And, a couple of my very early clients kept me very busy. So it happened very organically, for which I'm terribly grateful. Lots of different people that I met were very kind and would recommend me.
And I suppose competition for your business is businesses that think they can do it themselves. But at the time, were there any other businesses such as yourself that were offering these services to other businesses?
Yeah, there's one or two of us that I knew of in the charity sector. Within commercial companies, yes, it tends to be the business development teams. Some have large bidding teams. Awards tend to be written by marketing or PR people. So, and I think in the early days, I wasn't really quite sure who my customer was. I just knew I could write. And if somebody would say to me, could you write this? My response will be, yeah, I'll give that a go. And let's see what happens, because I knew I could answer a question. And it just happened, very, very organically is the best way to describe it.
And so for me, when I hear of people that have worked in charities and that sort of sector and then gone on to build businesses of their own, I always feel, and perhaps it's the wrong impression, but you are used to making a lot out of a little and trying to be really resourceful and being efficient. Did you take anything that you'd learned from working in a successful charity into building a business of yourself? Are there any particular lessons that you've transitioned from one to the other?
There is nothing that I wouldn't do. And I used to expect that when I had staff that worked for me. So, when I answered the phone, it was things like, make sure you're smiling down the phone, make sure you answer everybody's messages, make sure you call people back. I taught myself how to use Twitter when I was at the charity, so I did that. Perhaps not very consistently, but, I would give that a go, and I would mimic people that I respected. So when I was teaching myself how to network, I would go to networking events and look at people and notice how they did things, and then would try that on for size for myself. And I'm a very nosy, curious person, so, I'd ask people. And I met some amazing people in my early years of business that are still very important to me now. And I found that Derby's business community is so supportive, really supportive, which is nice. And how it should be, really.
Yeah, that's something that I've definitely found myself. I was recently at the Small Business Saturday event that you were a part of and have been a big part of in the past. A lot of the guests have been from the Derby community, and everybody knows each other, and you're absolutely right. There is this ethos of, everybody's here to support each other, and it just feels like a really close-knit family's perhaps a bit of a too cheesy word, but it's not far off that.
They're a good community of people that are very generous with their advice, which is very heartening when you're not quite sure. And at the end of the day, it's not brain surgery, and I make mistakes. We all make mistakes, but I learn from them. So I think that's the most important thing, that you just have to pick yourself up, dust yourself off and get on with it.
Which parts of the business do you enjoy the most? What do you enjoy about being a business owner?
The freedom. I like to win. I really like to win. And I get a huge kick out of writing new things. So I'm a bit of a magpie, I've discovered over the 5 years or so.
But I suppose for somebody that writes award submissions, to like shiny objects it's a good trait to have.
Yeah, I like brand new shiny ideas, and that's why I like writing the bids and the tenders, because it's something new all the time. That being said, I've got some great long-standing clients that I absolutely adore. So I like that side of things. I like to be able to spend time with my family when I want to be able to do that. And I really like answering people's questions, what don't they understand? Because I think it's interesting that what I see as obvious, they don't, and I find that fascinating.
And do you tend to find that's because you can view things with an unbiased outsider's perspective, whereas a lot of people are so embroiled in what's going on a lot of the time, it's like they've got the blinkers on?
Yeah, sometimes, but also the fact that they just don't know that world that I operate in. Equally, I don't really understand about IT tech and specs for things.
Which parts of business are you not so fond of? As a solo business owner, as a solopreneur, what's the parts that you get the least kick out of?
It's more the roller coaster ride, I think. You have such extreme highs and lows that you have to have resilience in, like bucket loads. And I'm a fairly resilient person, but there are times when that's hard, and emotionally and mentally that's demanding.
How do you do it when you are in those lows? How do you pick yourself back up?
So I talk to friends. I also have a dog that I take for a walk. So sometimes you just have to down tools and go. You leave everything at home, mobile phone, the lot. And the one good thing that Cooper's excellent at is
Cooper's your dog?
Yeah. He just gets joy out of everything. And so you do need to be more dog.
I was going to say, it must be a nice mindset to have.
He's a working Cocker Spaniel, so it's just everything is just so exciting. And sometimes you just need the time away from it. And I think it's okay to be honest and say it's hard. And it is hard. It doesn't mean that I don't want to do it. And, you're not moaning, but sometimes you just don't feel like it, or it seems an insurmountable hill to climb. But there's always tomorrow. And I know of people right now that are going through such difficult times with their health. That serves as a kick up the backside for me of, come on, Rachel, it's not that.
Just puts it into perspective for you a little bit more.
Massively. I mean, I'm a trustee of a charity, Annabelle's Angels, and we support people who are undergoing cancer treatment. That is tough.
Yeah, I saw a LinkedIn post this morning, and I can't remember who it was, so if you're listening and I haven't credited you, then my apologies, but it was something along the lines of, your house is a palace to a homeless person, your family is amazing to somebody that's on their own. And so when you think about things like that, it does put your own problems into a slightly different perspective, doesn't it? What would you say your proudest moment is so far, as Ask the Chameleon, or your biggest success? Is there one that stands front of mind?
Proudest moment was taking my mum to Buckingham Palace.
Okay. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So, not last year, year before, I was one of the Small Business 100, which means that you're one of the 100 businesses leading up to the Small Business Saturday campaign.
And for those that don't know about Small Business Saturday campaign, can you just give us a quick summary of what it's all about? Because a few of the other guests have been a big part of this as well, so it's an important part of the Derby community as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a fantastic campaign. So it came over from America, and it's sort of an antidote, if you were, to Black Friday. And originally it was to encourage people to shop locally on their high street, retail, but over time it's now encompassed business to business, such as myself, as well as business to customer. And they have a small team in London who do amazing things. And the best way to describe it is it's the marketing campaign that you can't afford as a small business owner. And you apply to become one of the Small Business 100. Small Business Saturday is the first Saturday in every December. And they announced the 100 to take a day for the 100 days leading up to the campaign. So you can get allocated any of the 100 days, and it's yours to do with what you wish. So some of them will offer discounts, some of them will offer additional products or services. It could be anything that you want it to be. And it was one of the first awards that I'd put in for, and God damn it, I won and I was nominated. I was actually standing in Derby Arena for my PGCE award ceremony at the time with nobody to tell because it was embargoed, but equally my parents weren't right next to me at the time. So, and then because of that, somebody, and I still don't know who it was, through one of the government departments nominated me to be put forward to be invited to one of the 4 garden parties that the Queen has at Buckingham Palace. And I couldn't believe it. It came through as an email. First off, I thought somebody was pulling my leg. And then I realised it was real. And I thought, well, I don't know anybody at the government department, And they said that they wanted, that I might be chosen, I might not. And who would I like to take? So I did ask James first, my other half. And he said he would, but he thought the person that would really like it would be my mum. Oh, my God, she was over the moon. You'd have thought she was going. But it was so lovely to see because, I think parents must all feel this. Parents put their children first with everything, and me and my sister were no different. So to be able to take them, and my dad and James came as well, but they just went to the pub while we went to the palace. And it was so exciting. And it was lovely, and we had a lovely day. The weather was very kind. It wasn't the Queen that we met, it was Prince Charles and Camilla and Princess Anne. But oh my God, it's the most amazing place. So it felt very special, but to be able to share it with her was, it was lovely. And she was all over my social media. It was in the paper. Her friends were ringing her up and she was telling everybody. And it was just, because she was so proud, I was so proud. So yeah, that was lovely.
And you still to this day don't know who it was that put you forward?
I think I do, but when I asked this person, they weren't quite sure. So whether that, I don't know, but that was because of Small Business 100 and my work as a university lecturer as well. So yeah, it was a huge honour, and it just topped off an amazing year, really.
Yeah, and I think there's definitely a common theme from our conversation so far, is that doing something well, it's not just the end result, it's the other opportunities that are unlocked as a result of that. There's so many things that certain things can lead to that you could never have imagined. It's crazy, but it sounds amazing and a really great moment, especially to share with your parents as well. So if we could take it back to the time that you've been self-employed, be it Rachel Hayward Consulting or Ask the Chameleon, what would you say has been your toughest challenge so far?
Toughest challenge is working out who that ideal client is and how to find them, if I'm honest. Because everything happened, not by accident, but it definitely wasn't by proactive design. It's still a work in progress. And because people can do what I do, and I don't have a magic wand, and I'm very honest with my clients about that. Sometimes I don't win, and as much as I try really hard, it happens. So working out who that client is, working out who I want to work with, who I'm most suited to, because I can't believe how fast the 5 years have gone. I think I'm still working at that.
Do you think it's something that you need to work on?
If you read a lot of the business books, yes, you do. And sometimes I think, oh, Rachel, you really need to have that clear. But then I like being open to new opportunities and new businesses. And for example, I've written parliamentary review copy. I would never have said that I could do that. But a client said, oh, we've got an opportunity to be in this parliamentary review. Would you write it? Yeah, okay. So maybe yes, maybe no. But this is perhaps one of the things that some of the business books don't tell you, is that it doesn't have to be one particular way.
Yeah, it's not black and white.
No, it's not. So sometimes if I thought about things too much, it would be like, no, it has to be done this way all the time. Does it? Sometimes I think I need my own office in Derby. You need to be here all the time. Do I really, though? Because actually, I can write wherever there's good Wi-Fi and coffee. And this is one of the things that I felt really passionately about when I applied for Small Business 100. It's like, it doesn't matter if you've got premises or you work from the kitchen table. It doesn't matter if you've not worked out who your ideal customer is. It doesn't matter. Just do it in your own way and just do it. Yeah, I think I'm still working on that, and I think I'll still be working on that in 5 years' time.
I think we all are. And if you could go back to day one of Ask the Chameleon, so you've had some experience by this point, you've launched the business as Ask the Chameleon, and you could change one thing that you would have felt would have made the biggest difference. You may not have changed anything, but if you could, what would it be?
PR earlier on, I think. And actually probably writing awards for myself earlier on, because there are some awards that I've missed out on because I didn't put myself forward in the first 2 years of trading.
It sounds obvious, doesn't it, for an awards company to win awards, but when you're so engrossed in doing it for everybody else, I can see how it goes.
And it's difficult to write for yourself. One of the first ones, if I read it back now, I'm mortified because it doesn't sell me enough. It's too safe. And even though I do think for self-employed people to write about themselves for awards within the first 2 years, I think is asking a lot. That's what the first few business awards that are available ask for. So maybe that, but I think things happen for a reason, and I think having that track record made all the difference, really. So I don't do regrets, and I probably wouldn't really change. It happened, I believe it happened the way it did on purpose.
Good answer. I like that. And so at the moment, you're obviously still doing great work with the uni, heavily involved with the Small Business Saturday and the Federation of Small Businesses. You've got Ask the Chameleon as well. What's the plans for the future? Where do you see yourself taking the business over the next coming weeks, months and years?
I've got some exciting news coming up which reinforcing the commercial tenders. I've had some good news and a big win for a client.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's not my win, it's our win, but it's really hard to talk about. So that's really exciting. But I've recently been appointed to the LEP Business Advisory Board. So I really want to make a difference, or try to make a difference for small businesses and our contribution to the economy.
What is the LEP Advisory Board?
So the LEP is our local enterprise partnership, which here in Derby, Derbyshire, Nottinghamshire is called D2N2.
Oh, okay.
And they're the economic engine to bring everything together, so visitor economy, business, skills, housing, social mobility, all those sorts of things. And I've been appointed to... They've got various different boards, and then there's an advisory board underneath. And my particular role is looking at business engagement. It's a voluntary thing. So I really want to make sure the voice of small businesses are heard. And you couldn't get any smaller than me, because I'm a micro business, there is me and nobody else. I think we're very interesting and very productive.
Is that by design as well? Has that been the way that you've designed the business to maintain it as just you?
Yes, because 15 years of HR and making people redundant through no other reason than funding coming to an end. The responsibility of somebody else's livelihood is a bit too scary, to be honest. And I think if I'd have started the business 15 years earlier, it might be different. I just want to write really great content for other organisations to grow. I'm not after an empire now. But that doesn't mean that I view my company as a lifestyle business either. I hate these boxes that they put people into. Yeah. It's my choice. But never say never, because there could be somebody around the corner that's perfect and it grows and who knows?
Yeah. Do you wish you had started 15 years ago, or do you feel that the experiences that you've had during those 15 years have led you, like you say, to where you are now?
Yeah, no, this was always meant to be the way it worked out. But what the path is going forward, I don't want it to be too strict. So like being an MD by the time I was 35 could be the edge of a cliff if I wasn't careful. So I don't want to be too narrow in case I miss the opportunities. So the LEP is one. I'd like to do more speaking and more work with university students, because I think bringing them closer to businesses is important. I certainly didn't know about the range of different jobs that were available when I was at university, and look how much it's changing now. I want to help Annabelle's Angels, really get out there and support more people that are going through cancer, because that's important. And whatever new and alternative opportunities. I'd like to do more writing, but more writing, fiction stuff maybe. I don't know.
Lots of options though. Lots of options to work out.
Yeah, and I also want to go back to university and do a doctorate, but not just yet.
Wow, okay. Some big plans for the future then. Okay, so we know about your speciality, we know about your journey to launching Ask the Chameleon and some of your challenges and your proudest moments. Now I'd just like to dig into a little bit about your own beliefs about being successful in business. So do you have any sort of routines or habits that you try to stick to on a regular basis that you feel have contributed to your own success?
Because I'm an expert juggler, I write a lot of lists. And the one thing that I do now is I write my tomorrow list today. It's the last thing I do. So what I've not been able to do today, or what has to be done. I work to a lot of deadlines, which works for me actually. So now I say to my clients, right, we have to have a deadline, otherwise it's hard for me to prioritise. So that's what I do. I have a little book that I take everywhere. So I'm still quite old school with some things. And I have 3 screens on my desk at home so that I can have multiple things open. That comes from being a university lecturer.
See, I'm at 2. I've not progressed to 3 yet, but I'm excited. That sounds like a good idea, so I might have to give that a try.
Yeah, that works really well when you're marking. So, yeah, but my top one is tomorrow's list today.
Okay, and in terms of attributes, obviously you work with loads of different businesses and business owners. If you could define maybe 2 or 3 attributes within yourself as well that you think are required to be successful in business, what would they be?
I think you need to be determined. I think you need confidence and a sense of humour. You can have all the other things like being hardworking and resilient and grit and all of that. But you have to be very self-sufficient, because most of the time we work on our own. So if you haven't got it within, the lows are going to be crushing. But equally the highs can be too much as well.
How do you mean by that?
I think you need to keep things in context. So, for example, if I've had a win, it can make me giddy, but it's just that one win, and yes, you've worked very well, but there are other clients to support, other things to take
So it's sort of not to get complacent.
No, because tomorrow I could have no, you've not won. So you have to mind that. So it is that self-awareness and I suppose that ability to check yourself, really.
Do you think there are any good indicators for somebody before they go into a business for themselves that suggest that they are going to be able to cope with these things and they are going to be able to be organised and be able to be resourceful to be a micro business owner?
I don't know whether it's that clear cut because, for example, until I experienced redundancy personally, did I understand what people were going through? No, I didn't. Did that make me a better HR consultant? Yeah, damn right it did. Until I'd worked with disabled people, did I understand how life was difficult because of the way we construct our environment? So I advise a lot of my students sometimes to go out and work for other people to learn and observe and determine what it is that they want to do if they want to go self-employed. But that doesn't mean that that's the only way of doing it. Because if they've got a great idea, they can walk straight into Dragon's Den and, or to an angel investor. And I think the variety and the possibilities that are out there makes that even more engaging and available. So I don't think you have to have one size fits all. It certainly would be very boring if it was.
What do you think people should know about starting a business for themselves that perhaps don't? So, for example, any misconceptions that people have, what shocked you or surprised you or weren't you prepared for about being a solo business owner?
I wasn't prepared for the fact that people say that they will have you and work with you and then don't. The number of times perhaps some people want to see you before they make a decision. So I think sometimes everybody should have a period of self-employment because it would make their time management a lot stronger.
So for example, you may go and see a potential client and they say, "Yeah, we'd love to use your services. Let's come back to you," and they never come back to you. Yeah. You never hear from them again.
It doesn't happen very often, but when it does, you can't help but take it a bit personally and wonder, "What did I do something?" But that's business and it happens. Equally, and I've heard other people on your podcast say this: don't go into it thinking that you're going to be rich straight off or at all. I had a more secure income before. I don't now, but I have given that up for something else that I get. So I've given that up because of the flexibility, the control, the freedom, which to me doesn't necessarily have that financial price tag.
Would you consider yourself successful?
Yes, because I've won the majority of things that my clients wanted to win. So I define that in terms of their success in the things that we write together. Could it be more? Yes. Am I satisfied? No, but that's because I have high standards and I want to do really well and I want each year to be better than the year before. And I think that's something that a lot of self-employed people have.
Do you think that's something, is it nature? Are you born with it? Is it in your blood, in your DNA? Or is it nurture? Is it developed through your experiences over time and places that you've worked and family influences and friends?
I think that's a really interesting question. I talk with my students about, are leaders born or made or that sort of thing. And I'm not saying that I'm a leader, but it's just that nature-nurture thing.
What would you say is the answer to that question?
It depends.
That's the politician's answer here. You can tell you've been writing for politicians and hanging out at Buckingham Palace.
I always say that to my students as well. Well, it depends. You see, my dad was the first in his family to start his own business. So then that would show you that it's opposite. Family of people working at the brewery, always employed. And he started his business just before I was born, actually, and prior to that, he was a very successful judo champion. But if you met my dad now, who is 78 and still running his own business, he is so entrepreneurial and driven. So I think Melanie and I, my sister, Melanie and I share that. Now, both of us went into being employed, but Melanie is also self-employed. She went into self-employment earlier than me. And now I have as well. And I find that really interesting.
Yeah, it's got to be something to it. It's interesting, actually, because I'm reading a book at the minute that was gifted to me for Christmas called Freakonomics. and it talks about this parent's nature versus nurture, and it was something along the lines of like 50% of who you become is in your DNA. So people that have adoptive parents or are put into foster homes and things, as much as they can nurture them to be different people, actually they end up being much more like the original parents.
And it's really interesting if you look at the traits that we share, me and my sister, and we're 7 years apart, and she's different to me, but also we're very similar. Control, drive. And it was only when I was talking to a friend of mine and she said, Rachel, you come from an entrepreneurial family, and I hadn't realised that. And actually what's really funny is I overheard my mum having a conversation with my brother-in-law where she asked him what an entrepreneur was. She didn't know what the word meant, and we were like, well, that's you and Dad, because they ran the business together and still do run the business together. So my dad was very determined for Melanie and I to have an excellent education because he hadn't, and I was the first one to go to university. But he's very competitive, played a lot of sport all the way through, so's Mel. They don't really understand what it is that I do.
I don't think families ever do though, really, do they?
No, but when Melanie worked for Severn Trent, I never really understood what she did either. No. And this is why I say to you that it happened by accident, but I do wonder whether it was always supposed to be in the stars.
What would you like to do in your downtime? You mentioned your dad was a judo champion. Do you like to partake in any sports or hobbies or activities when you do get a spare bit of time between lecturing and everything else that you do?
I'm not sporty at all. My sister is. I'm not. I was always the books, and I sing in a choir here in Derby.
Okay, that's an interesting one. We've not had that one yet.
Yeah, so I sing in a community choir that meets every Wednesday, and yeah, it's a great stress reliever actually. And there have been times where I thought, oh, I won't go. No, you go. And it really does lift the spirits. And what's really lovely about it as well is that you don't have to read music, which I can't. Our conductor, Kev, is the only guy, apart from my pianist, and it's all women. And there's quite a number of us now. And I think for some of the ladies, it's their main event in the week. So we meet at the church on Ashbourne Road, have a cup of tea halfway through. And it's lovely, really lovely.
You just get to zone out,
yeah,
think about nothing else except singing and just de-stress.
Yeah, and then we have a concert it normally takes us 18 months to 2 years to build up the confidence. And they've just chosen Annabelle's Angels to be the charity that they want to raise the money for.
Wow. So have you got a date for the next concert yet, or is it a work in progress?
I have got a date, and I want to say it's the 21st of March. I think that's right. But we had to pitch, and the ladies chose who it is that they wanted, and I was really touched because they've raised money for us before, but my trustees love it.
Where can we see you if we want to turn up and hear some beautiful harmonies?
Oh, no. So the tickets will go on sale soon. The choir's called Crescendo Community Choir, and it'll be at the church on Ashbourne Road by the Co-op.
Okay, I'll put a link in the show notes, so if anybody wants to come and see you, then they'll know where to get tickets. Okay, so you mentioned that you're a reader there. Leads nicely on to the next question. If you could recommend one business book, what would it be?
Well, mine's not a business book per se, but it's The Chimp Paradox. Because one of the things that I learnt when I was, learning my craft in HR was that you have to keep your emotions in check. So understanding how you operate is really important, especially when you're dealing with people in really sensitive, challenging issues. And I learnt over time to really take myself out of the equation and really focus on somebody else. But every now and again, that other side of you, the more emotional side, really pops up. And I was fortunate to meet Steve Peters at a Marketing Derby event, and it was so fascinating. I've studied NLP when I was still working in HR, and I find all that really interesting, why people are the way they are, why they use the words that they do, how you can use language to bring about change in somebody by reframing the words that they use, and I try and use a little bit of it with my students. And I just found it fascinating, even down to name your chimp and I know when they're doing things that you're struggling with.
Yeah, so this is like the caveman part of your brain. So you must be the third or fourth person that's talked about the chimp paradox. And I got it on Audible, and I got about halfway through, and I couldn't listen to it anymore because there was so many. There was the tablet, the computer, the chimp, and I think it must be one of those books that's better to actually get the hard copy and read. So I'm going to give that another go, because it's definitely one of the most popular books that's been talked about by guests on the show so far.
Yeah, I've just tried to read or listen to audiobooks because I spend a lot of time on the screen and I was getting tired. But I'm not getting on with them very well, and I think it's because I'm so used to that visual thing.
Yeah.
It's making me sleepy when I listen to them.
Yeah, well, I only do it when I'm driving, so I can get a bit of education in at the same time instead of just listening to the radio.
Yeah, and I also I like to write in the corners or underline bits that are really important. So I read that one, and I tend to read in the summer because this time of year and autumn is when I'm teaching, so I tend to have to read a lot of business theory books. So it takes the
shine off it. Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
If you had to, or if you could, write a book about your own journey in business so far, what would you call that one?
Well, you see, there's a couple of titles, really. And I don't want to tell you in case I do write it.
Oh, yeah, because this could be the fiction, couldn't it? Yeah, we could see it in stores soon.
It could. And equally, I do think sometimes, I could write a book about what it's been to set my business up. And then you think, would anybody really find that interesting?
I think so, because I think from all of the bigger books, we hear about the billionaires and we hear about what's working for them now, but we never actually get to hear about what was working for them at grassroots level, which is what got them to where they are now. So, a lot of the habits of the millionaires and billionaires, they're their habits as a result of being successful. They're not the habits that made them successful. So that's why, for me, talking to local business owners that are still involved in the business right there in the nitty-gritty is just, I've learned so much from it.
And I think, sometimes people think to be in business you've got to be, 100 grand turnover plus, and as wonderful as that would be, that's not where I am right now, but it doesn't mean that I'm any less successful than anybody who's got that.
No, because like you say, you get the freedom and everything else that comes along with it.
And a lot of women in self-employment, are working from their kitchen table. Not everybody has children or caring responsibilities, but a lot of them have, a portfolio career, which is what I'd say I'd had and still have a little bit. So it's not typical anymore, which is no bad thing, I think.
What's the best piece of advice you've received?
Ask for help. No woman is an island. Yeah, ask for help. Because the best people that I've met in business are the ones that tell you about the mistakes they make, right? Because you do. And sometimes you make really big mistakes as well. But that's okay. That's when you learn the most. And okay, sometimes it can be raw and painful and you can feel embarrassed and a little bit stupid. But like I've said before, it's not brain surgery. There are worse things that can happen to people. So, ask, because you'd be surprised, at the number of people. I asked for some help for some things for Annabelle's Angels, and I was overwhelmed by the people that came to my aid for them. So, yeah, ask for help.
You've mentioned the fact that you believe everything is a result of, the steps that you've taken and the experiences that you've been through have led you to where you are today, and it was meant to be this way. However, it's a question that I ask everybody, so I'm going to put it to you. If you could visit 21-year-old Rachel, give her one piece of advice that would perhaps best prepare her for the coming years, be it in the charities or to be a successful business owner, what would it be?
21-year-old Rachel was just leaving university, and my advice would be, it's okay that you don't know what you want to be. It doesn't matter, because the opportunities are endless. So just say yes. Amazing.
Thank you for sharing that. So we're coming to the end of the interview now, Rachel, but before I let you go, I've just got a couple more questions. The first one being, if you could summarise all of your life experience so far, be it in business or working in the charities, and we were sat in front of somebody here that's about to start in business today, and you could give them 3 pieces of advice, what would they be?
Know what you are talented at. Don't underprice it, and say yes.
And finally, Rachel, for the listeners, if we want to find out more about you or the services that you offer at Ask the Chameleon, whereabouts can we find you?
So I have a website, www.askthechameleon.co.uk. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, askthechameleon.co.uk, and always on LinkedIn.
Okay, brilliant. And all of those links will be included in the show notes over at benjaminbrain.co.uk/Rachel-Hayward. So that wraps it up for today. Rachel, I just want to thank you again so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule to share some of your business truths with us. Thoroughly enjoyed it. And I just want to wish you and the business the best for the rest of 2020. Thank you for joining us. And as always, thank you for listening. Thanks for your support and look forward to catching up with you on next week's episode of The Truth About Business. One final thing before you go. If you enjoyed this interview and want to make sure you don't miss out on the next episode with another real-life business champion, make sure you subscribe via iTunes, Spotify, your favourite podcast app, or by visiting my blog at benjaminbrain.co.uk and hitting subscribe. At the blog, you'll also find the show notes to this episode, which includes all the relevant links to the website, social media channels, contact details, and anything else that was discussed in the episode. Just type in the name of the guest, and that will bring that right up for you. And finally, I'm always on the search for great business owners who would be happy to spare just a couple of hours of the time to share their business experience with our audience. So if you know of anyone that would make a great guest, or you'd like to feature yourself, just let me know. Send an email to hello@benjaminbrain.co.uk and I'll reply personally as soon as possible. Also, if you've got any feedback, questions that you'd like me to ask our guests, or any other suggestions, I am definitely all ears. That email address again is hello@benjaminbrain.co.uk. So that's it for this episode. I just want to thank you sincerely for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Stay hungry, stay fearless, get out there and make it happen.